Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Don Rusnak, our Member of Parliament for Thunder Bay, Rainy River. So Don, we were just talking about how kind of the government uses evidence in policy making, and you were talking about a local consultation here.
It was the disabilities consultation. Unfortunately, the minister couldn't make it for the consultation. She asked if I can sit in her place, and as we were talking on break, I hadn't been part of the team that went across the country, so I had my preconceived notions on what the issues would be, but it sometimes in the consultations, what you think are the issues aren't. Their periphery issues are not as big of an issue as you would think, and the conversation totally went a different way. So oftentimes I'm surprised in this role by what we hear, and that's part of my job, to make sure that information gets to government when cabinet's making decisions, when our caucus is discussing on where we should go on certain issues, that I need to get out there into the community and listen to what the issues are, because what I think or what my preconceived notions are on certain areas and where we think we should go may not be what the majority of people want to go, or where they want to go.
And trying to figure all that out, I think, is a pretty tricky issue. I think we were maybe both at the consultation on electoral reform, where the minister came and an interesting evening. And when I hear the report from the minister, I kind of go, geez, that doesn't sound like the meeting I was at. Now, of course, I was only at the one. But what I saw was, like 80% of the people said we want proportional representation. Now, there's a number of ways that could play out, but more or less, that seemed to be overwhelming consensus. And she said, there's no consensus. And I went, what the heck? And it makes you wonder, like, how does that information gets translated into whatever then the minister is going to respond?
So what I've found, and this is now I'm not speaking for the government, myself personally, what I've found is that oftentimes when you have consultations on certain issues, you get certain people who come out who have an interest in only the issue, and sometimes they only have an interest in one side of the issue. Mm-hmm. So I know the minister had done a lot of consultations right across the country, not only consultations personally, but asked MPs to do consultations. And I can speak. I was at that session, which was. It was organized in a different way, where they had breakout groups and smaller groups discussed, and then they came back. A little bit different than the way I did my electoral reform consultation, where we just had an open conversation. Yes. So we did one in Fort Francis, did one in Atikokan, and did one here in Thunder Bay. And what I found from the constituents that came, that a lot of the systems that were out there, they didn't understand. Mm-hmm. And to fundamentally change the way we elect our government, they told me that we needed more time. We needed to do an education program for the people on what systems were out there, so people could make an informed choice. And that was the information that I reported from the sessions back to the minister. So I don't know if that happened all across the country, and that's the information she got. But I can agree with you that at the session where we were with the minister, that yes, approximately 80% of the people wanted proportional representation. Now, having said that, were they the people that came out because they're very interested in proportional representation and that's their one issue, or were they a real cross-section of the community? I don't know, and I don't know how you measure that. I was there, but I didn't organize the events. So.
I know. These are all tough questions that somehow government has to figure out. So, I mean, another tough one, and so you mentioned you chair the, was it the Indigenous Caucus?
Yeah, the Liberal Indigenous Caucus, yes.
Okay. So there's an area that the government's got a lot of room to catch up on. You know, we've so underfunded education and health for folks in our remote communities. Where are you going? What's the priority? What issues are you working on there?
I think I have some more gray hairs.
Join the crowd.
Steve, it's not that we have the answers, right? And I think over the last 150 years, government, and we can look at the horrible, horrible past, and all agree that residential schools, the reserve system, the Indian Act, all the systems imposed on Indigenous people over the last 150 years and maybe longer have been horrible. And we look at the Indian Act, and it's what apartheid was designed off of, right? It was the root of the apartheid system in South Africa, and we know how horrible that system was. But it's not. I've had this conversation many times with other people interested in the topic. Who should come up with the answers to get out of the solution? It's easy to say that the answers are inside the communities, and I truly believe they are. Mm-hmm. But to just shirk that responsibility for helping the communities get out of the desperate situation that they're in. So I think it's partially the government has to provide the tools for the communities to raise up and get a level of capacity to where they can make those decisions. And some communities are there. Mm-hmm. And some communities are doing amazing positive things, and some communities are out of the Indian Act and participating fully in the economic prosperity of their regions. We look at some communities in BC that they don't have enough people for the jobs that their community actually has, so they're hiring from neighboring non-Indigenous communities, and it brings wealth to everyone. So no one wants to see, I truly believe this, no one in this country wants to see our Indigenous communities do poorly, and we have to stop having the idea that the government has the answer or the government's going to provide the solution. Another program from the Department of Indigenous and Northern Affairs is going to solve the problem. It's not. The answer truly is inside the communities, but we have to be there as a federal government to support the communities, to allow them the tools and the capacity to solve those problems.
So what would some of those tools look like?
Well, of course, funding is a huge aspect all the time, but it's not only about funding. It's about providing, we look at the social services in communities, and we look at especially family services. So we've heard a lot about Cindy Blackstock and coming to, she's been to the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee, I think 3 or 4 times already, and saying that more money is going to help the issue with child and family services in First Nation communities. We have broken systems of child welfare across this country, and pouring money into those systems isn't going to necessarily fix it.
We're going to hold it right there. Sorry, Don. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.